We're at the Terroir Creative Writing Festival at the Chemeketa College campus here on Literally Literary. We want to welcome Steve Long, who has been at Terroir more than 1 year. He is very well versed in the art of self-publishing. Steve, thank you for joining us on Literally Literary.
Thank you so much.
And could you tell us a little bit about your experiences with your workshop and being involved with Terroir?
You bet. I believe I was the first person that Barbara Drake asked to help out, and this is now 7 years ago. And Barbara and Emily Chadwick got together and sort of conceived this thing. And yeah, I've been involved in one way or another for the last 7 years.
Now you're a published author, am I correct? There's a Somebody is your novel.
Correct.
And it was self-published, correct?
You know, it's hard to define. Hybrid publishing is one of the ways that I've heard it defined. My book was nationally distributed, but I did pay for the printing, so to that extent it was self-published.
So you've been through this gauntlet now of the experience of publishing, which is its own kind of endurance course, and then now you give this workshop on self-publishing at Terroir, correct?
Sure. I did, and I think, as I've said so often, I think the publishing industry is just in chaos in the sense that nobody knows how this is going to shake out, and it may not. I mean, it's sort of an ever-changing landscape. But I think it's telling that some place like Archway Publishing, which is a division of Simon Schuster, is specifically concentrated on self-publishing. So that's an arm of an established traditional publisher that just does self-publishing.
Can you tell us a little bit, I've talked to a few people there, there's a branching out of the Terroir experience now in the form of what's being called Word Studio workshops.
Sure.
So I guess there are people here back and forth who have taken a few of those. Are you planning on giving any Word Studio workshops?
It was interesting because of some email glitches. I learned about this late, and they'd already been assigned. But I think it's a terrific idea. They're well received. The people teaching are knowledgeable and very helpful. So in the future, sure, I look forward to that.
Now, in addition to teaching these workshops, you also have a show about the writing life, called The Writing Life, isn't it?
The show is called The Writing Life, right?
Can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the people you've interviewed?
Yeah, you know, this was sort of the brainchild of Mike Santenay, and he asked me if I'd like to do it, and I thought a little bit about it, and it sounded like fun. So our hope is to really discuss all aspects of writing, from its creation, which would be the author, right through, I hope to have editors and agents, even publishers, some writing teachers. I've made some initial overtures to some writing teachers. Well, in fact, we did Joe Wilkins, who is a writing teacher. That was one of them. And then I'm going to twist Cilla McClellan's arm. And so that's at the very end of the process. That's the selling the book. And just what are her experiences, you know, kind of what's the state of the book market. And also now coming up here, we're going to have Courtney Terry from the library. And so that's another aspect. In fact, I even want to talk to songwriters, just anything that has to do with this conveying emotion or concepts, ideas through words.
So part of the Terroir experience, the closing of the festival, is an open mic. So I was just wondering, can you tell us, do you participate in the open mic here at Terroir, and what other open mic venues have you been to in the area?
Sure. Actually, for the past 6 years, now 7, I've emceed the open mic, and which I just thoroughly enjoy. It's a great way to wrap up the day. Sometimes people read what they've produced during the day, and that's kind of spontaneous and fun. Other folks come prepared. They brought something that they've worked on. And I think a big part of writing is sharing. And it's just a real opportunity now for the participants to get up and share. So yeah, it's been fun. I've not been to the one at, I think, Willamette Winery.
Willamette Valley Vineyards on 3rd Street.
I've not been to that one. I have been to the Velvet Monkey, and I've just both been in the audience and on occasion read my own work.
Well, Steve, I have one last question for you that I've been asking today.
Yeah.
Let's say there's a time machine shows up, you're able to step into it and go back in time for 15 seconds to find yourself somewhere in the past. What age would it be, and what would you tell yourself?
Oh gosh, I thought you were going to ask about another author. What would it be? I've always been fascinated by Ben Franklin, I have to say. He was a bit of a scallywag, I think, but obviously such a visionary, so smart. I think I'd like to say hi to Ben Franklin.
Really? Pop in, say hi.
Yeah, well, if I only have 15 seconds.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us on Literally Literary, Steve.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you want to tell the audience about Terroir or your experience here, or someone who's never been here before?
Well, I tell you, I am so proud of this. When we started and had our first little meetings, we thought if we could get 25 or 30 people to show up, that would be a success. And we went to the Arts Alliance and asked for some money and kind of cobbled this thing together. And I believe that the attendance the first year was over 100. And so we thought, boy, we're onto something. And now the staying power, the longevity of this is that, again, it's our 7th year. I don't know that the numbers have grown substantially, but I think we're becoming somewhat of a fixture. And I think people look forward to it. And if you're in the area and have not only an interest in writing, but I think in reading, and I've kind of come at this a different way. And I use the example of me and film. I'm not a filmmaker, but I love to hear documentaries about how they made a film, how they make decisions. What do you leave in? What do you take out? Just how is it done? And I think so many people are readers that they might enjoy sort of getting behind the scenes there and listening to somebody. How do you do this? How do you write 140,000 words? How do you structure that? How do you make those decisions? So I would just encourage people to come. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's a great day.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're at Chemeketa Community College campus in McMinnville, Oregon for Literally Literary. We are interviewing one of the participants today. This is Salim Hakim. Thank you for joining us on Literally Literary. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences at Chemeketa College itself, but also with the Terroir Festival?
Well, I'm a student of Chemeketa. This is my 2nd year at Chemeketa, and I also work for the campus, so it's also great to see what goes on behind the scenes. I'm also a former student of one of the people part of the Terroir Writing Festival, Snook Brown. He's a great writing teacher. I've had him for a majority, if not all, of my writing classes. And to see him be a part of the Terroir Writing Festival, it's great because you get to see him out of that teaching element, but he's also teaching you outside of the actual college student-teacher element. And the writing festival, I think it's great this in general to have Oregon, but McMinnville in general show their natural writing talent, and to see all the talent that we have to offer for a small town. It's amazing, and it's great to network, and you see a lot of peers getting their proteges, mentoring them, and it's really great.
So Salim, tell me about the workshop you took today, or did you take more than one so far, and what did you think so far?
The 2 I took so far, I took this one about blogging like a boss by Emily, and it's really informative because I've always kind of tiptoed in starting a blog or not starting a blog, and just to see the process of it's like almost like having a second-time job, and to see how much dedication goes into it and how much heart and passion these people who actually do have blogs do it, and how can it become lucrative or just a way of expression of authenticity. After that, I took the workshop with Dr. Sam about miscellaneous items, how some of us we are hoarders and we collect things and we don't get rid of them, but in a sense all those things have stories, and those are writing go to me, you know, that little piece of paper or that postcard, you know, or things you find at Goodwill, like the little head of a doll or something, that everything has a story behind it, and just to write about it, you know, so scraps turns into stories to me. So that was amazing to see that, you know, maybe what I have is not actually junk, it's this writing material.
So did you start out as an English major at Chemeketa?
I started out as a communication major with a gearing towards a minor in English, and then but before that I wanted to do music, so I was a music major. So then after I realized music wasn't the best fit because I knew I wanted to be financially stable and have a family, and that was iffy, so I went into writing. I fell in love with writing, and then I wind up, after a miraculous chain of events, getting into nursing. So, but communications is still my manner, and so if, you know, writing's on the side. If it takes off, we'll run with it. But yeah, nursing is where my heart is.
Well, if you met someone who'd never been to Terroir before, what's the first thing that'd come off the top of your head to tell them?
The first thing I would probably have to say, it's welcoming. I've been to other writing festivals, and you kind of have that stuck-up vibe, you know, and the who's who and everything. It's great to see everyone mingling, you know. There's no cliques or no crowds, you know, and they're very open. They're willing to help. They want you to succeed as much as they do, or even more. So I think that's another thing. And also, I think it's a great experience, you know. It's I think it helps you become a better writer. You learn, you know, and it gives you motivation to write. You know, if you're having writer's block, you come here and you're like, I got an idea, you know, so it helps you with that. I think those are the two things I would definitely point out.
Well, I have one more question for you. Let's say a time machine shows up, you step inside it, you go back in time to anywhere you were in your life, at any age you were, and you can give yourself a quick message. What age would you go back to, and what is the message you would give yourself?
That's kind of tricky, because one, I'm a firm believer in the butterfly effect, so if I would change anything, obviously it would have drastic effects in the future, but also I would probably not even go back. I would probably just write a letter to myself, you know, won't even jeopardize seeing myself. I would probably just tell myself I'm going to be all right, you know, because you never know what you're going to go through, but you're going to be all right, and you just got to trust your gut, and most definitely listen to your parents. You know, they got the best advice. I mean, we're young, we're naive, we're hard-headed, but they've been here longer than you, and just because you think you have the answers, you know, still listen, you know. Wise men don't know everything, only fools do, so definitely listen.
Well, thank you for joining us on Literally Literary, Salim. I hope you go back and finish the rest of your day and have a lot of fun. Are you going to be at the open mic?
Yes, I'm in the middle of writing some things, so hopefully they turn out. But thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are here at the 7th Annual Terroir Creative Writing Festival, and one of the participants, Susan Jeffries, is here. Susan, this is the first year you've been at Terroir?
No, I've been here twice before, so this is my third year in attendance here.
So what is it about Terroir that you enjoy?
I really enjoy speaking to other writers. It's sometimes writing can seem like it is a personal process, but sometimes it feels so personal that you don't really know the other people out there, and so I really like meeting other writers that are also passionate and, you know, think it's a valid thing to do.
Are you going to be here for the duration of the event all day?
I am. I'm really excited.
Very good. Well, I know you're heading off to a workshop real fast, so I'll let you go, but I just have a quick question I'm asking folks. If you stepped into a time machine and went back in time, you could just say something to yourself really fast, what age would it be, and what would you tell yourself?
You know, I think I would be 5. I was a kindergartner, and we were learning the alphabet, and I left out a letter, L. And I was so upset with myself, and I went home and I erased the whole thing and had to do it over because I was such a perfectionist. And I think what I would tell myself then is say, you know, good job, but also don't be so hard on yourself. So.
Joining us on Literally Literary at the 7th Annual Terroir Creative Writing Festival at the Chemeketa College campus here in McMinnville, Oregon, is Ed Edmo, who is joining Terroir for the first time this year. Is that right, Ed?
Yep, that's right, first time.
How did you find out about Terroir?
Terry emailed me, and Barbara Drake from several years ago from Portland, so called Barbara, so we reconfirmed, so I got here.
So you came all the way down from Portland to do the workshop?
Yes, yeah.
So tell us about your workshop. It was about storytelling?
Storytelling and poetry. I talked about the importance of storytelling with Native Americans, the way we taught children how to act, and passed down from generation to generation. I was raised no electricity, no running water, no home computer, no TV, no iPad. My father told me Indian legends developed into a home run business. I have a new policy this year.
Yeah.
Never turned down free food. But I've taken several business courses on how to run my business, and they said keep track of your income for 3 years. Found out I was slack in the summertime, so that's when I wrote. I've been writing poetry since '62, short stories and drama since '84. Worked with the Eugene Valley Company since '86, narrating Children of the Raven. Did a world tour in 1995, went to Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Jordan, Syria, Tunisia. First play I wrote in 1984, Through Coyote's Eyes, won me a first place at the Inside Fires Cultural Theater When I Play Festival. 3 years later I had another festival, I won third place, a stage reading, so I like writing plays. I adapt legends for the theater now also.
What in your writing process, do you usually, what brings you to write a story? Is there a character that stands out for you, or does something happen, or is it an idea? What starts that process?
Mainly I've been doing a lot of character sketches. I was raised with unique Native American culture and have a lot of unique people in my memory that are real people I can draw off, and my family were rodeo people, and I write about that genre. I do a play called Grandma Choke Cherry, where I come on stage dressed like Indian grandma. Got moccasins, sushcahos, matching skirt and top, grandma bandana, half clad bead eyeglass holders, bright little lipstick and rouge. Come on stage, hee, I'm Grandma Choke Cherry. I ain't got much education. I tell stories at Eagle Claw Alternative School. She talks about the boarding school atrocities, Wild Indian Rodeo Days, talks about stick on whiskey, tells stories of humor and hope. Drove that into a one-person play at First Chapel in 1997.
So when you were, so I kind of want to talk about storytelling, because I think this is becoming a lost art.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that it be learned as an oral art, that when it is instructed, it isn't just a book you read about storytelling. It should be people who pass on these stories, because they are important to connecting people.
Yeah. I think it's important to have an ear for story. I was raised with storytelling with my father. I passed on to our daughter. She's a storyteller, and my granddaughter's learning storytelling from me also, passing the tradition on to the proper way of storytelling.
So if you met someone who had never been to Terroir before, let's say 6 months from now, you meet someone in Portland and they mention, oh, I heard about this festival, Terroir Creative Writing Festival. What would be the first thing that came to mind? What would you tell them?
Serious writers. There's many writing groups like closet writers that aren't published. They see these people here are published and they're working writers. They're joining writers groups, so they're working on writing. So I think that's important. You have dynamic speakers also.
Are you staying for the open mic today?
No, I'm getting back to Portland.
It's been a long day, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I have one last question for you. A time machine shows up. You're able to step into the time machine and go back in time to any age you were and give yourself a message from the future. If that were possible, what age would you go back to, and what would be the message?
Junior in high school, I'd say start writing plays then, because plays are more fun for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah.
And we hope to see you again at Terroir next year.
Good. Maybe it'll be there. But thank you very much. Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're at the the Terroir Creative Writing Festival in McMinnville, Oregon, now in its 7th year, with Marcy Rosenzweig, a participant who had been here more than once apparently. Marcy, tell us a little bit about your experiences at Terroir, and how many times have you been to Terroir?
You know, I was trying to figure that out this morning, and I don't think I hit the first one, so I've probably been 6 times. Because I remember when it was in the community center, and now we're here, which is a much better facility for the kind of workshop environment that Terroir is. So that's, I think, 6 times.
6. So what kind of, what are your workshops are you taking today, and why are you taking them?
Well, I'm a wannabe, like most of the people here. So I'm taking Emily Grosvenor's blogging workshop.
Marcy, tell us a little bit about these workshops called Word Studio. What is this program? And for someone who's never been to one before, what would you say to that person?
Oh, I really like the Word Studio. I've only done one because that's what my time would allow. But I did one with Emily Grosvenor on blogging, and I'm going to take her blogging workshop again today. She's a fabulous teacher, but Word Studio is an intimate setting for usually 4 weeks. With the same group of people and on a particular topic. So Emily did blogging. There's one on memoir. I can't remember what the other ones are, but it's a great way to have a one-on-one kind of time with a published author who is trying to impart technique to you. I have a fantasy that I will actually start a blog one day. So working with Emily was great. She's very accessible.
This year at Terroir, they received a grant to bring in some extra students, young writers. So Marcy, what would you say to young writers who are coming into this for the first time?
Write.
That's it, just write?
Write. The problem that us wannabes have is that we don't set aside time to do that. So we always think we want to write and we never get it down. So my advice to young people is if you think you want to write, do it. Write. Set aside some time, write.
We're at the 7th annual Terroir Creative Writing Festival, and we are on the Chemeketa Community College campus with William Sullivan, who has presented a workshop on how to make a living as a writer. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Sullivan. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to give your workshop here at Terroir and what it's like to make a living as a writer?
Well, they've had this workshop out here for 7 years, but I first heard about it at the Wordstock Festival, the literary festival in Portland, and they said, you should be out here talking to people about how to make a living as a writer. Well, it turns out I do make a living as a writer. I may be the most published author of Oregon books in the state. I mostly do hiking guidebooks that people know me about, but I've also done several books on Oregon history, a couple of adventure memoirs, and 5 novels now, including a couple of murder mysteries, often with a local hook. But here I was telling people that their stories, everybody has stories, and they're kind of like pebbles in your pocket, that they're waiting to be told. But at some point, your conscience or a spouse or a mother-in-law is going to ask you to turn those pebbles into coins, and it is okay to actually to not only write for love, but it's also okay to write to make a profit at times, and your work should be valued. And there are different ways of doing this. The traditional route of using a publisher in New York has really gotten out of style because there's so many ways to self-publish now with electronic books and print on demand, and I told people a little bit about those opportunities.
Can you tell us a little bit about, so some of your book, you have different ways of telling your story. Some of them are nonfiction, some of them are fiction. Is there a point when you have this nugget that you realize this is fiction or this one's nonfiction? Is there something about that process that stands out?
Well, I actually started out writing fiction. People wouldn't know this, but I studied at Cornell and creative writing and all that. But it's very hard to publish a first novel by an unknown author. Nonfiction outsells fiction 10 to 1. So I decided to take a 1,000-mile hike across Oregon and write 2 books, nonfiction books. One, a nuts and bolts guidebook to all the wilderness areas in the state, and the other, the adventure story of that 1,000-mile hike. And they both did very well. The adventure story is called Listening for Coyote. It was chosen one of Oregon's 100 books, the 100 most significant books in the history of the state. On the course of that hike, I was held at gunpoint by marijuana growers, and I poisoned myself with mushrooms and wound up hiking 40 miles a day through Hell's Canyon trying to outrun these October snowstorms. So it never had the financial success of Cheryl Strayed's book Wild, because I needed more baggage. I think I needed to have like drug problems and a wife that was unfaithful or something. But the book, it kind of launched my career as the hiking guy. And since then, I like to alternate. I'll do a book of nonfiction, hiking, love to hike, it's fun, but it doesn't use every bit of your creative spirit. And then I'll do a book about short stories, some fiction, something crazy. And that's both fun, intellectual release, and gives people something to chew on to.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us on Literally Literary. And before you go, I have a quick question. I've been asking all the interviewees this. So a time machine shows up, you can go back in time for 15 seconds to anywhere in your life, to whatever age, and impart a message. What age would you go back to, and what is the message you would give yourself?
Wow. I think I would go back to when I was a high school English teacher. For 1 year, every writer needs a backup job, And after 1 year of teaching high school English, I swore I'd rather do anything else in the world. I wanted to be a freelance writer, but I didn't have any money. My wife said she would support me for 7 years. If at the end of 7 years I wasn't making a living as a writer, I had to swear to get a job clerking at Kmart. And what I would tell myself would go back and say, trust your wife. She's right. She believes in you. You need to believe in yourself too.
Mr. Sobel, that was a wonderful, wonderful answer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
We are here on another episode of Literally Literary, and we are at the 7th Annual Terroir Creative Writing Festival on the beautiful Chemeketa Community College campus here in McMinnville. We're talking to Lisa Wiseman of Linville College, who is actually one of the coordinators of Terroir. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
Let us know a little bit about yourself and some of your involvement with Terroir.
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm a professor at Linville College. I teach in the mass communication department, and I was an English major with a creative writing emphasis as an undergraduate, and so I've always had a fondness for creative writing, and that's why I got involved with the festival. From the very beginning, actually. I was on the board of directors of the Arts Alliance of Yamhill County when Barbara Drake came to the board with the idea of having a writing festival here in Yamhill County, and I said, that sounds like a fun project, I'd like to be involved. So since the beginning, we started planning the first festival in 2009 and held it in 2016. I've been involved, and my skill sets have led me to be the person who's kind of in charge of public relations and marketing. Although last year and this year I've had some fine help in that department from Emily Grosvenor, and so she's been doing the website. I've been doing the communication with the newspapers in the county and other media, and we've been sharing Facebook duties, and so we're working on that, months in advance, and all the way leading up to and during the festival. Actually, we're posting on Twitter and Facebook today. And then I also, because I happen to live with the treasurer of the Arts Alliance, I do the budget because he gets the checks and passes the registration forms to me. So I handle the registration information for pre-registration as well. And so it's been a really great community event for me to be involved with, and we have a terrific core group of planners who have been, most of them, working on the festival for a number of years, but we get some new people every year, which is always nice. This year, some things that we haven't had before that I'm excited about are 2 sessions on the oral traditions related to literature. So one is the art of storytelling, and that's being led by Ed Edmo, who's a native traditional storyteller as well as poet and actor and many other things. His list of things he does is quite long. Anyway, but he's going to be talking about sort of the core central aspects of storytelling that are timeless. And then we also have Josiah Phillips, known to his friends as JP, who is an actor with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. He's been with them for 22 years. He's also traveled around acting. He's acted in Portland and here in McMinnville, and he's doing a session on some of the techniques that actors use that writers can apply when they read their work out loud, like at a poetry reading, as well as when they read the work of others. So those are 2 new things that I think are really great this year.
So Lisa, tell us a little bit about this. It's a new program. It's Word Studio. It's a series of workshops, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. We've had a desire for several years to find a way to kind of keep the energy and inspiration of this one day, the Terroir Creative Writing Festival, alive throughout the year. And we've talked about different ways to do that, and we had the idea that maybe if we could offer some workshops that were not too expensive, that would be offered throughout the year, that would be a way of keeping our writing community together. And so last summer, Emily Grosvenor and I wrote a grant application with the Oregon Community Foundation to help support the development of those workshops. And so we're doing it, and we called it Word Studio, and we've already had 1 workshop series that has been completed. Each one has 4 class sessions, and the first one was about blogging, and Emily taught that one. And we have one coming up on writing memoir, on historical fiction, on poetry, and one on flash fiction. And if you don't know what that is, that's very short fiction, very short stories that can be written pretty quickly. And so that's a great entry point for somebody who's interested in writing fiction, but doesn't want to have to try to take on a novel as their first project. So we've got them scheduled throughout the year. There's information on the Terroir Creative Writing Festival website about that. It's terroircreativewritingfestival.com. Sorry, it's so long, but that's where you'll find that stuff. And so the first workshop had good enrollment, and we're just holding them at coffee shops and wine bars and after hours, and a couple of other places around the county, and particularly in Carlton and McMinnville and Newburgh, I think. And hopefully they're gonna, it's gonna work out, and maybe we'll get a grant to do it again next year, or they'll pay for themselves next year. So it's $75 for 1 4-week class, and most of them I think are being held on weeknights, so one day a week. So we hope people will sign up for those too.
Well, Lisa, thank you for joining us at Literally Literary. And before you leave, I have a quick question for you. If you were able to go back in time, in a little time machine for 15, 20 seconds, to any age you were, what age would you choose to go back to, and what is the message you would impart to yourself?
That's a challenging question. Well, given the role that technology plays in my life today, and given the fact that I am typing my communication most of the time, the scholarly papers that I write, the emails that I send back and forth with my students, texting even, I would tell my 9th grade self, take the typing class. Didn't want to take it, didn't want to have to become a secretary. I thought if you don't have the secretary skills, you'll get to do something else. But actually, if I could touch type, it would be really helpful.
Well, Lisa, thank you for those words of wisdom, and thank you for joining us at Literally Literary.
Thank you.
We're here at the Chemeketa Community College campus in McMinnville, and joining us on Literally Literary is Marcy Berg, a first-time participant at the Terroir Creative Writing Conference Festival here. Marcy, tell us a little bit about your experience as a first-time attendant.
It's actually been a great experience. It's the energy, the creative energy with all of the local writers has been really exciting. It's been kind of fun to run into people I knew that I didn't realize wrote. And I've attended several workshops where I just feel like I really got some really great ideas and some encouragement, and I'm ready to go and sit at my computer and write.
So Marcy, you say that you came to Terroir and met people you never realized were writers. You knew them, but you didn't know they were writers. So speaking as a McMinnville resident who writes, can you tell us a little bit about your writing process, and do you go to any writing groups in the area?
Sure. Writing often tends to be a pretty solitary process, and so a lot of times it's me and my laptop holed away somewhere. But once a month I participate in the Working Draft Writers Workshop, which is held at the McMinnville Library the last Monday of each month. And we have a great small community there where we get to read and critique each other's work and really encourage and support one another in our work.
Do you have a regular site, or do you have a Facebook page?
We do. Yeah, there's a Facebook page for the workshop, and you can just go and like the page, and we post our monthly events and activities. Sometimes there's writing prompts, and we also post local literary events and encourage people to just be part of the literary community, be part of the conversation.
So when you mentioned the literary conversation, did you have a chance to go to the book sale after the Terroir conference?
I did. I picked up a couple of titles, and so now I'm going to have to kind of balance my writing time with my reading time.
Well, real fast before you go, Marcy, I have a question I've been asking everyone. So, time machine shows up, you're able to get inside the time machine, go back to any age you were, and impart one message to yourself. What age would that be, and what would be the message you would want to tell yourself?
I think I'd go back to being 17 years old and just tell myself to not stop journaling, because there's some great stuff in my old journals that I found and things that still ring true today for me.
Well, thank you, Marcy. Thank you for joining us on Literally Literary, and we hope you come back next year for Terroir.
Sounds great.
Thank you. We are at the Chemeketa Community College campus at the 7th Annual Terroir Writing Festival, and with us is Brian Tibbetts. Brian, welcome to Literally Literary. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience with Terroir? This is your first year.
It is.
And you gave a workshop on finding an agent.
It is.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to do that?
Of course. I gave a workshop today on how to find and work with a literary agent. I was pressed into service for this as my boss was booked to do it, but he'd already been booked for another conference. So I got the nod to come down and give it a shot. This is the first time I've ever given a seminar of this kind. I've been working as a literary agent for a year now with McGregor Literary, and I was happy to provide whatever kind of insight and whatever sounding board I could for the participants here at the festival.
So Brian, now that you've been to Terroir, and this is your experience here with our workshop process, if you met a writer, a young writer who had heard of it and came to you and said, I've heard about this writing festival, but I don't know anything about it, what's the first thing that would come to mind?
Value, actually. Well, value and community. I get a great sense of the local writing community here, and there's just a really good, genuine feel to this conference. And given how inexpensive the admission fee or the ticket price is, there seems to be a great deal of value in what's going on here this weekend. So I would say it's definitely worth the cost of admission and the time you're going to spend here.
So Brian, I have a couple of questions for you. First, could you tell us a little bit about what you do up in Portland? And also, could you tell us, in regard to your workshop that you gave today, was there any particular question from one of the participants that really stood out for you or would particularly stand out?
In Portland, well, I work for myself. I do work for the McGregor Literary Agency, but it's akin to being an independent contractor, being self-employed, in that I work with them, but it's not as if I have a boss like right over my shoulder all the time. I also work as a freelance writer and as a freelance editor in Portland, but it's all, in the auspices of my basement office, sitting there grinding away on the computer all day. Insofar as your second question goes, the question I got from a seminar participant that really stuck out to me was just one I hadn't heard before. I had a writer approach me after the talk was over and the Q&A period had kind of quieted down and asked me for some advice about starting a career as a writer and having very diverse interests. One foot in the academic publishing world, another foot in literary fiction, and possibly another foot in literary nonfiction. And how you would approach an agent when you have projects that seem to not really be in one particular market. That's one I hadn't heard before, but academic publishing is so separate from the world of literary fiction and literary nonfiction that what I recommended to her is to do some research and see if she could find agents that were willing to kind of split her career up so that they could play in their levels of expertise, one being academic and the other one being trade publication.
So that's kind of an exception to the rule to seek out more than one agent then,
Typically speaking, yes.
Really?
Generally, you sign with an agent and they manage your career for as long as you're signed with them. There are agents that are willing to sign like single contracts for single projects, but that is definitely not the norm. At least in my experience, it seems a little more outside the norm. But in this regard, academic publishing is such a different market, such a different world with its own idiosyncrasies that I can't even speak to because I don't play in that market, that I would definitely recommend somebody if they came to me and they were looking to do both, that I would be willing to handle things for the trade publication market, but they need to go their own way with academic publishing.
All right, well, thank you for joining us. Before we leave, I have one last question I've been asking all the interviewees. So a time machine shows up, you step inside, it goes back to anywhere in your past where you want, and you have about, you step out and you're able to impart one quick message to yourself at another age. What age would that be, and what is that message?
I would probably, this is tough because I don't like to revise my own history because I get the feeling
that... Do you want to go forward in time instead?
No.
Oh, okay.
I doubt there's any wisdom I can impart on my future self from this perspective, if my retrospect, Anyway, it's hard because you're made up of the things that you've done in your past. But I might go back to when I was first discovering writing and let myself know that it is possible to do what you love for a living. You don't necessarily have to keep your day job.
What age was that? Were you a college student?
21. Yeah, when I went back to college the first time, after a few years in the restaurant business.
So what gelled for you? You decided literature and the literary world was the place where you wanted to be?
I kind of came to, well, not at that age, but I came to an awakening a few years ago where I realized that I had spent a good portion of my adult life in pursuit of careers that I never intended to have. And that the thing that had stuck with me, the thing that I had done, even though I wasn't being paid for it on the side, was working in publishing and writing. And that I wasn't getting any younger. And that if I wanted to realize a full life in that, or at least what I had time for, or time left for, that the time was now to get started down that path. So I cashed in my old life and paying my dues in the new one, as they say.
Well, thank you for joining us on Literally Literary, Brian, and thank you for participating in Terroir.
Thank you.
You're with us at Literally Literary on site at the Chemeketa Community College campus at Terroir Creative Writing Festival in its 7th year. And with us now is Kate Carroll DeGutis. She is a published author and giving one workshop here at Terroir this year. This is your first year, isn't it?
This is my first year at Terroir. I can't say that word very well, I'm sorry. But I understand from Barbara Drake that you guys couldn't say that word very well.
And we've learned. It's kind of like literally literary, and then there's terroir. So
terroir.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
So your workshop is about writing about difficult subjects and using humor. Can you tell us how you came to give that workshop?
I came to give that workshop partly because I know Tandy Tillinghast and Lisa Olin Harris. I went to graduate school with them, so they asked if I would come and give a workshop on humor. And I do a workshop on humor and difficult subjects because in the span of about 10 months, I had my editor, my best friend, and my mother all die. And my editor died 2 days after finishing the edit on my manuscript. So I had to laugh or else I was going to be in the fetal position on the floor.
So this manuscript, is this the book that won the Oregon Book Award?
It is. It's Objects in Mirror Are Closer Than They Appear. It won the Oregon Book Award on Monday night for nonfiction. It was a really bittersweet win because Judith Kitchen, my editor, wasn't here to see it. But it's really exciting. It's also up for a national award. It's up for the Lambda Literary Award in memoir and nonfiction. So it's getting a lot of recognition, and I think Judith would be so pleased about that.
That is great. So when you've been to Terroir this year.
Yes.
So when you meet a young writer who's never been here before and they say, "Oh, I've heard about this writing festival," what's the first thing that would come to mind for you?
Oh, I would absolutely tell them to come. What I love about this conference is there are two things I love. There's diversity of age, right? I've seen everything from teenage kids here to 75-year-old people here. And the other thing that I really like about it is that you have big name writers at a tiny little festival in Yamhill County. Like you guys have managed to attract Sean Levy and all these big names, right?
And they come here.
And they come here. Right, exactly. And David Mason doing the keynote was amazing. He just had an interview featured in the Writer's Chronicle that talked about his process. And I mean, that's a national writing magazine. And then here he was here talking about his process too. So I think that's an amazing thing that you guys are doing.
And this year, apparently, the board was able to secure a grant to bring in more students. Oh. So they're trying to bring in more younger students and younger writers.
Yes.
And this has really helped to keep it fresh every year.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not stale. It's not this is my first year here, but I know from writing conferences in Portland, sometimes you get the same old. And I love that my audience had young kids asking questions about how to get started and about process and about craft, and then adults as well that are well on their way, that have already had publications under their belt and just want a little craft help. So
you write about humor to write about these difficult issues in the writing process for you as a writer. do you have do you see a setting for a story first, or does a character pop to mind, or does it come out of some kind of integral experience? What's your starting point?
So that's a great question, whether it's character, setting, or experience. And my background's in journalism, so it's always an experience, right? So always something from the larger world sparks my interest, and then it ties into either my experience or the experience of those I love. I only write nonfiction. I feel like I am constitutionally incapable of writing fiction. So I write kind of classic essay, and my book, Objects in Mirror, is closer than they appear, is a memoir in essays. So they're short little essays that all connect together.
So as your origin is in journalism,
yes.
So I'd like to ask you, what do you see as far as the difference in the way it's changing now culturally, the way that we tell stories, especially with the digital age?
Yeah.
I mean, it's practically injected into you the minute you walk outside. But what is your take on the change in journalism from obviously when we were younger to
right.
now? I mean, what was your take on that?
Right. I have two takes. I grieve the demise of print, right? I still get a paper every day. I am a liberal Democrat who reads the Wall Street Journal every day, partly because I'm in business and I'm in technology, and so the Wall Street Journal has great information, and I read the Sunday Times every Sunday. So I love holding a piece of paper in my hand, and it has been documented in fMRI machines that we actually retain information differently when we are physically holding an object versus electronic reading, whether it's on a phone or a Kindle or an iPad or anything. So I do grieve the demise of paper. But what I love about where we are now is that the internet opens up a whole world for us to get way more information than we ever got, and we get way more different viewpoints, right? Because there are people on the ground that are reporting. I mean, we wouldn't know about the Arab Spring were it not for Twitter, right? And Facebook and things like that. And microbloggers that are telling stories that wouldn't get out otherwise. We wouldn't necessarily know what was going on in Tibet or in India or any of these remote places because reporters wouldn't be on the ground there, and or editors wouldn't waste the column inches on it. So it's both things.
So you say that you don't really see yourself as a nonfiction writer, as a fiction writer, that
right.
You focus on nonfiction. So because usually when someone is writing fiction, they have an outline and a book proposal, do you ever use book proposals in your nonfiction process?
So that's a great question. I have written book proposals for nonfiction books before. So Objects in Mirror is my third book. It's the first to find a publisher. The first two books did have proposals. The proposals got picked up by agents. They never got picked up by publishing houses. I got really lovely rejections that say, you don't fit our list, but we like your writing. So I haven't done a book proposal in a long time, but I think my third book will have a book proposal. My second book's already been picked up by Two Sylvia's Press. It's called The Authenticity Experiment, and it's based on my blog, which is The Authenticity Experiment, and you can Google that and find it. And sign up for the mailing list, I hope, because publishers want you to have a big mailing list, as you know, probably from talking with folks. But my third book, I think, is going to have a traditional outline because I'm not sure I want to spend all the cycles writing it. It's more narrative nonfiction, much more research driven, and so I think it'll have an outline to answer your question in a very long way.
Well, thank you for joining us, Kate. Before you go, I have one last question I've been asking everyone. So
Yes.
Here it is. A time machine appears, you can step into it and go back in time for, 15, 20 seconds. You can give yourself a message, just a short message to yourself. But what age would you go to in the past, and what is that message you would impart to yourself?
Oh, what age would I go to in the past? I'd probably go to myself at 22 and say, Don't worry about graduate school, just keep writing.
Really?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Literally Literary, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Joining us today on Literally Literary, we are at the Chemeketa Community College campus for the 7th Annual Terroir Creative Writing Festival. And with us now is Lisa Olin Harris, who has been a regular at Terroir for quite some time. Can you tell us about your involvement with Terroir?
Sure. I think it was about 4 years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to volunteer for a committee for this local writing festival, and I really didn't want to, but I drove down to McMinnville from Newburgh, and I sat around a living room of one of our committee members, and these people were nuts. They were talking on top of each other, and one person would make a suggestion and someone else would talk all at one time, and I thought, I am not coming back, I'm done with this. And so I left. But I did come back for one more meeting, and you know, I came back for one more after that, and one more, and these people grew on me, and now I have a pretty loud voice, so I'm able to assert myself in these meetings, but we have a lot of fun. This is, I believe, my 4th year on the committee and my 3rd year teaching. Last year I did manuscript critiques. I didn't teach a session, and then the 2 years prior to that I also taught.
In addition to your workshops at Terroir, you are also involved with the Word Studio program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm going to be teaching a life writing class this summer. That'll be in July. Tuesday evenings here in McMinnville. We're still kind of working out a location, but I promise it will be air conditioned. That's going to be, I believe, 6 to 8:30 at night, and we will be looking at writing about your life. We'll look some in terms of technique, and we're going to have some writing time, and I will be also providing manuscript feedback for my students during that time. I think it's really important for us to write down our lives and write down our thoughts as we're living. I have a friend in Newburgh who took the time one year to write about her life, to write about her childhood, some pretty hard things in her childhood. She wasn't writing for publication, but she did end up self-publishing a very nice little book, and she gave it to her family as a Christmas gift. So it was her way of putting her life between some covers as she wants it to be remembered, and also to share with her kids and her grandkids what she learned through some hard circumstances. That's something I really respect and I think is really important, and I would love to help other writers or aspiring writers to be able to figure out how to write their lives down in a way that other people are going to be interested to read, so that we leave a record of when we go.
So Lisa, now that you've had some experience with Terroir, a couple of years, 3 years now, so tell us, if you were, let's say you were in Seattle getting a cup of coffee and someone wandered in and they were talking to their friend and said, oh, I heard about this Creative Writing Festival somewhere down in McMinnville. It's called Terroir. What's the first thing that would come to mind?
Well, I do think that people in Seattle are all abuzz about the Terroir Writing Festival, I'm pretty sure. But I think I would have to talk about the crazy name first of all, but of course the name comes out of the land, the region here. And one of the coolest things about this festival is that we have local writers who are presenting. Of course, we have local writers attending, but we try to make as many of our teachers coming out of the terroir of this place as possible. And that's something I really love, because so often you go off to a regional conference and they're flying in speakers from somewhere else, but we are growing them right here. That's why we have the Word Studio classes. That's why we have this festival. That's why we have a packed out not auditorium, but room over here, and that's why speakers are so excited and glad to come to this festival. I don't know of another small festival that's as exciting and has as much to offer as the Terroir Festival, so I'm pretty sure they're talking about it in Seattle, and when I overhear them, that's what I'm going to say.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for joining us on Literally Literary. I have one last question for you before you leave. A time machine shows up, you're able to step into the time machine and go back in time to any age you've ever been and impart one message. What age would you choose, and what is the message you would impart?
I would go back to myself when I was 40 years old and first starting out as a writer, getting up at 4 a.m. to write until 6 a.m. when my kids got up, and I would tell myself, it's not going to always be this way. Your kids are going to be able to get themselves out of bed, brush their own teeth, get themselves to the bathroom, get off to school all on their own. My writing life is entirely different now than it was 12 years ago, but I would encourage myself to go ahead and take the risk and do those early mornings. It's hard and it's painful, but I got a book out of it. And so any writer who's starting at a difficult season of life, that season will change and you'll be glad that you stuck with it.
Thank you, Lisa, for joining us on Literally Literary, and we hope to see you again at Terroir next year.
Thank you.
We are at the 7th Annual Terroir Creative Writing Festival, and with us is instructor and published author Samuel Snook Brown. Welcome to Literally Literary. Mr. Brown, can you tell us a little bit about your workshop today at Terroir and your experience having been here at Terroir more than 1 year, correct?
Yes.
Is this your third year?
This is my fourth year attending, second year presenting.
Can you tell us something about your workshops?
So today I talked a little bit about how to use the objects that most people would consider trash, discards, just little random bits and pieces that you pick up here and there. Use those to create story rooted to an object. So I use the example from Italo Calvino's 6 Memos for the Next Millennium, where he talks about this legend of Charlemagne and a magic ring. And the ring sort of moves through the story from person to person, and that's actually the narrative. And I used the same concept with these random bits of life that people sort of let go of or discard and other people pick up. Things like, empty liquor bottles or old receipts. By the end of the day, I started mentioning in my own family, I've inherited a bunch of junk, literally junk. Old housing deeds, my great aunt's budget book that she used to go shopping in the 1920s in Oklahoma. And in that are the details of a life. In that are the things that she bought, the brand names that she used, the prices of those things in that time period. And it gives me an entire life to work with on the page that somebody else might have just tossed in the trash because it's just a budget book and it's full and it's done and you move on. So that's what I was talking about today, is how to root story in those objects that aren't necessarily the obvious objects to root a story into.
So I believe it was it 2014 that Hagridden came out?
It was.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, was the year that Hagridden came out, you had a workshop on geography and environment and how that's a part of the story. And I'm a fan of Hagridden in that the environment in Hagridden was a character in the story. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I found myself almost by accident writing historical fiction a lot. And that, of course, entails a lot of research. So this is a related field in terms of, where do you find story? In this case, I had a story I wanted to tell. I knew who the characters were. I knew kind of the plot of what was going to happen. But I wanted to root it in an unusual time and place. I was telling a Civil War story. And there are tons and tons of Civil War stories that are out there. So what was going to make mine special? And by setting it in the sort of deserted bayou of southwestern Louisiana, where nothing really happened during the war, it gave me a different kind of Civil War story to tell. And to do that, I have family who grew up down there, and so I had some memories of what that was like, that area. But to do that, I actually took a research trip and walked around in the marsh. My wife kept worrying I was going to get eaten by a gator. And to root it in that particular region required me getting down into the ground and actually walking around in that space and talking to people there and listening to the cadences of their language and the kinds of stories that they would tell. And that's what brought that region to life in the book.
So Sam, part of the terroir mythology, the whole purpose of terroir is that terroir references the sense of place that comes from the soil itself, what is created out of that soil. So we have this creative culture burgeoning here in the Yamhill County area, of which terroir is a very important part of this festival. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is doing here, what you're seeing as far as the changes culturally, especially for writers, and with some of the work that's now happening with the Word Studio workshops, which apparently came out of terroir? Am I correct?
Yes.
Are you teaching any of the workshops with Word Studio?
I am doing a Word Studio workshop on historical fiction, running from May into June, first week of June. And that one kind of grows out of, when I was first getting into writing historical fiction, a friend of mine, somebody had asked him how to research for fiction, and he didn't know because he hates doing research, so he passed that question on to me, and it got me thinking about it in a more intentional way than I had been before. So I started taking all these notes, and I wound up developing this sort of series of tips for how I wanted to approach researching for historical fiction in particular. And I broke these tips down into sort of a variety of categories. The first one, for example, is marry a librarian, because my wife is one and she's fantastic. And so my actual point was to find somebody to help you with the research. But I've also got things like checking the map, making sure that your details are accurate. I've got things like going to the source, interviewing people who are experts in the field, things like that. And so I'm sort of taking these sort of small workshops that I've been doing at the Terroir Creative Writing Festival and expanding it into a longer discussion of a fuller process of researching for fiction.
Can you tell us a little bit as far as, so they have an extended series of workshops throughout the day here, and then at the end there's an open mic. Are you part of the open mic?
I did sign up for it this time, yeah. I love an open mic, and I kind of hold off and wait for other people to fill it out before I jump in. But sometimes you have to jump in to get the ball rolling. But we've got some community members that have signed up for that today. Some of my former students have put their name in to read at the mic today, which I'm particularly thrilled about. Anytime I can get a student up to read their work is exciting. So yeah.
So now, is the open mic all poetry, or is there prose also?
As far as I know, it's open. It's just you get up there and you do what you do. I imagine many people will be reading poetry. When I put my name on the list, I think I'm going to read a bit of prose from a new novel that I'm working on, in fact. Try it out, see how it sounds aloud.
Part of the encouragement of this open mic is to also bring in a more diverse age range. We've noticed that there are younger people attending. Apparently there was a grant provided to Terroir to bring in more younger people. What can you tell us about that process?
I wish I knew more about that process. I know that Emily Grosvenor was involved in writing that grant, as well as the grant that helps fund the Word Studio workshops. And I think the intention was to go out and actually target schools and try to bring students here at a reduced rate or even free to get more younger writers in this area to participate in this writing culture that we're developing here.
So if you had a student that came to you, had never been here before, and they said, I heard about Terroir, what's the first thing that would come to mind that you would tell them?
I would talk about the community of writing and writers that exist in this area. Most of the time when people think about Oregon writers, they think Oregon in general, and then they immediately go to Portland. And there's a rich and vibrant community in Portland, and I'm a part of that community. But there's also a rich and vibrant community here in Yamhill Valley, and in fact, some of the Portland writers stem from Yamhill Valley. In fact, Barbara Drake, who's part of this conference here, her daughter is in Portland. They are both writers, and they are both fantastic human beings to work with in a writing sense. So I would tell students that. It's like if you're looking for a way to nurture the craft of writing, this is a place to do that. You bring that in, playing off the metaphor of the terroir. You plant your seed, and this is the soil in which to do that. So,
I have one last question for you before you leave us. If a time machine appeared and you could step into that time machine and go back anywhere in your life and give yourself, just impart one quick message, what age would you go back to, and what would you tell yourself?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I suppose, I was thinking about this the other day, I suppose I would go back to my 7th, 8th grade years, which is when I first began to seriously think about being a writer. When I was in 7th grade, I decided I was going to write a novel. And so I started writing a novel. And all through writing the novel, I was sort of daydreaming about being this young sort of phenom that would wind up on Oprah doing interviews. And I carried that vision with me for a lot longer than I probably should have. So I would probably go back to that person and say, A, don't worry, you're gonna make it, right? You'll have a book out, you'll be part of a writing community. This is a dream worth pursuing, but be patient. Don't rush it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Literally Literary, and thank you for being a part of Terroir.
Thank you.
With Barbara Drake, who helped found the Terroir Creative Writing Festival. Barbara, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved with the Arts Alliance and with the creation of Terroir?
Yeah, I retired from Linfield. I taught there for 24 years, and I retired in 2007. And so at that point, as a volunteer activity, I joined the Arts Alliance board and served on that as the president of the board actually for 2 years. And in the course of that service, I learned a lot more about arts and volunteer service in Yamhill County than I knew while I was teaching at Linfield. And a lot of the activity of the board had to do with visual arts, although they did sponsor the Paper Gardens event that welcomed a lot of people to submit poems and stories and so on. But after 2 years, I felt like I wanted to take a different approach to serving in the arts in the county, and had been talking to a former student of mine, Emily Chadwick. We would meet up at the farmer's market and say, we should have some kind of writing festival here. And so I decided I would put my effort towards a writing festival, and the Arts Alliance agreed to support our first year to see how that went. So we planned it, and a number of other people joined who were interested. Lisa Weidman, who teaches at Linfield, Ellie Gunn, that a lot of people know, and who was working on a book of her own. A number of other people got interested, and so we planned the festival, and we reserved a space at the community center, and we worked out an arrangement for lunches and started inviting people. And I can't say that we knew exactly how it was going to go. We hoped that we would get 30 or 40 people at least, and on that first year we ended up with over 100 people attending. So it was amazing, and it was really wonderful, and people were excited, so we decided to continue it from year to year. And I can't remember how many years we were at the community center, and that was good, except that after this wonderful space at Chemeketa Community College opened up, and with the new college, it looked like a really good partnering opportunity for us. And Stefan Nesbitt was the chairman of the board at that time, the president of the Arts Alliance board, and she suggested that we talk to people here, and they were really happy to accommodate us and trade space for student participation and a number of other things. So we love this venue. It's a great place, and I think everybody should come out and look at it if you haven't seen it. So we've been here for a few years now.
Can you tell us a little bit about the student participation program you have set up with Chemeketa?
Yeah, it's basically in exchange for the space, they can send a certain number of students and faculty, and so I don't keep track of them a lot, but they're both students and faculty coming to the festival, and that's really nice.
So Barbara, can you tell us a little bit about your keynote speakers that you've had at Terroir, how you find them, who they are, and who should we look for coming up next?
we work as a committee, and there are eight or 10 people on the committee every year, and everybody puts in their suggestions, and we talk about them and think about, more than one thing. We think about, we want to invite people in that aren't too far away. We have a limited budget. We can't fly people from New York. We want to have a program that represents both out of area people and Yamhill people. So we try to get a good balance that way, because we want it to serve Yamhill writers and people who are interested in writing, but we also know that we need to bring in out of area people to add some variety and attract attendees and so on. So this year we had David Mason for our morning event. He's a poet. He was the former poet laureate of Colorado, but now he has a home on the Oregon coast, which is nice. Sean Levy spoke after lunch. We have generally two, I don't know if you can call them both keynote speakers, but they are speakers who speak to the whole group. And after these, we break up into small group sessions. Sean Levy is a writer who has written about movies and movie stars, and does biographies, and he used to be a movie critic for the Oregonian and so on, and very entertaining. So those were really good. In the past, we've had poet laureates, Paul Ann Peterson. Last year we had Peter Sears. We have had people who are from Linfield, Anna Kesey, Joe Wilkins, Lex Runciman, who teaches poetry at Linfield. We have panels of people from around the community. We have people like Steve Long, who has published one novel and knows about self-publishing and promotion and so on. Is very good at that. So we tried each year to cover a few more genres. So this year we had young adult, children's books, poetry, what should I call it? Gothic fiction or historical fiction. Sam Snook Brown taught that. He has taught at the community college here, so he helps us with our connection to the college. And just to have a good variety. We had a romance writers panel. We've invited publishers from around this area, from Portland and elsewhere, to come in and do a panel on the presses in Oregon. So it's a great program, and I think there's something for everybody. The only complaint we get sometimes is that people want to do it all. And because we divide into small groups, we can't do that. So we're thinking about how we might manage. Maybe some people would do 2 different sessions of some sort or something like that, so people could spread themselves around. But it's a busy day. And also we have a Scylla McClellan from 3rd Street Books runs our festival bookstore. So she orders and sells the books for us. She orders books by all the writers who are here, and it's a venue for them to sell their books and get out there and have book signings and so on, which is a big job. So I'm glad that Scylla's willing to take it on, and it's great.
So Barbara, the first year of Terroir was, I believe Ursula Le Guin was the keynote speaker, and I know you've had other authors in, Jean Owl. Do we have any idea who to look forward to for next year?
We have one speaker scheduled for next year so far, and that will be Lydia Yuknovich, who won the Oregon Book Award this year for fiction, and also the People's Choice Award, which I think is going to be very exciting to have Lydia on the program. We were sure to get in touch with her early so that we could have her save the date, because she's going to be very busy this year.
So Barbara, I know there are different things under the umbrella of the Arts Alliance of Yamhill County, including Terroir. Can you tell us a little bit about this new, it's a workshop event, word studio. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, some of the people on the committee were ambitious enough to apply for a grant to cover a series of workshops. We have all been talking about how we wanted to expand beyond the day of the festival. It's great to to have a festival, but it's one day of the year, and there are people out there who are hungry for more opportunities to write and to learn how to write. And so several of the people on the committee, Emily Grosvenor, Tandy Tillinghast, Lisa Weidman, applied for a grant and got one to support a series of workshops, which range from historical writing. One is going on, not historical writing, using history in your fiction. Sam is doing that right now. It started off Emily Grosvenor's blogging workshop, which turned out to be a wonderful opportunity for people. I didn't know, because I'm not a blogger, that there are a lot of people that want to know how to blog, and you can be good at it and you can be a complete failure at it where nobody's paying any attention to it. And Emily is really good, and so she offered the first workshop. We have a nonfiction memoir workshop coming up with Lisa Olin Harris. I don't have all the dates in mind. There are other ones. I'm doing a poetry workshop in the fall, and let's see, I'm trying to think. Heather Sharfadine is doing one. I'm not sure what the title is, after mine. And anybody can find the schedule by going on to the Arts Alliance website and looking for links, or going to Terroir on Facebook. We have posts on Facebook, and you can find the schedule and the location. And one of the great things about this is that we're doing it all around the county. We're having, it's meeting Remy's Wine Shop at the Coffee Cottage Annex in Newburgh. I'm doing mine at the Horseradish in Carlton. And so there's this great aspect of it, that it's reaching out into the community and not just centered in one place. So I think it's a great idea, and I hope that we can come up with the support to continue it next year when this series is over.
So Barbara, let's say someone hears about this and they may not be able to attend, but they want to support it somehow. What would you want to tell those people who really want to support Terroir and the creative process in Yamhill County?
We have had good support from a number of different directions, mainly the Arts Alliance, but also people donate things for auctions. Monica Cecil Phillips, Marilyn Warrocks, other people. We've had food contributions from Roth's Grocery and Betty Lou's and places like that. And then we have grants sometimes, and we have gotten grants from the Yamhill County Cultural Coalition and through different Oregon Community Foundation and other groups. And sometimes individuals donate. We had donations this year from the Linfield Eye Clinic and some other places. So this is great, but we always, I should say, operate on the very edge of our budget. I mean, we have to cover our event. And it's mainly covered by registration fees, which we keep as low as we can. And I think we do a good job of that, but we never have a big abundance of money left over, if any. So we just kind of come out even. So I would like to say that anybody who wants to contribute, we'd love to have cash or some other kind of contribution. And of course, Chemeketa contributes the venue, which is wonderful. But in particular, if you have a certain type of writing that you would support, you might, or a certain person that you would like to support, to bring, you might, or you just might think of that you would like to sponsor one speaker, and it's not that big of a expense to support one speaker. Say if you offer $300 to bring in somebody from Portland or Salem or Eugene or someplace not too far away, that would be great. And we would put your name on the program, and we'd give you all the thanks for it every time we mention it, and that would just be wonderful. So I'll just say, if there's a certain part of the festival or of the workshops you would like to support, a genre, a person, or just a general donation, please think of us and get in touch.
So they should go to the website then?
Yeah.
Okay, the Arts Alliance?
You can contact the Arts Alliance or the Terroir.
Oh.
But we have a link on the Arts Alliance. So the Arts Alliance is the place to start.
Very good.
AAYC.
AAYC.
Yeah.
Now, as I understand it, one of the workshop leaders at Terroir, a regular workshop leader, is Steve Long. He's a local McMinnville author. He also has a cable access show called The Writing Life. Have you been on his show?
Yeah, I've been on it a few times. I'm a writer myself, and so he usually invites me on when I publish something. I had a book, my newest book is Morning Light, and it's actually creative nonfiction memoir about living in the country in Yamhill County, and it's got everything from stories about sheep and chickens to water to wildflowers, and why my husband and I decided we just want to stay in the country even though we're retired now. And so Steve is always very generous about inviting speakers on, and that is an occasion for talking about our own work, whoever we are, or talking about the festival. So he's been with the committee for, I think, since the beginning, running the festival, and he likes to get the news out there because he's a supporter of writing and writers, as well as being a writer.
And he was one of the workshop leaders this year too, was he not?
Right.
Very good, very good.
And he also runs the MCs, the open reading at the end. He's very good at that, and so every year he does that and gets people up and they read their works. That's a nice event at the end of the whole day of the festival, is where we have an open reading for people who can read their work either that they bring or things they have done in the workshops during the day.
Well, Barbara, thank you for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary and for all of your work with the Arts Alliance and Terroir. But before you leave us, I had a quick question. If a time machine showed up out of nowhere and you're able to step into it and go back in time to any age you were and just step out and impart some wisdom to yourself as a younger person, what age would that be and what would you tell yourself?
Well, I'm not sure. There are a lot of ages I'd like to go back to that were good times, but since we're talking about writing here, let me connect it to writing and creativity and so on. And my mother was always really good at reading to me and showing me how to draw, and I sort of went between drawing and art and creative writing and reading. I read a lot when I was a little kid, and to the point that people were sometimes saying, "Oh, get her nose out of that book." But I remember when somebody gave me Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass for my 6th birthday, and there's the poem in there, the Jabberwock, that's printed backwards, and I immediately climbed up on my little dressing table and held it up to the mirror and read that, and I loved the poetry in it and the sound of it. And I've been reading poetry and nursery rhymes and fairy tales and everything before that, but at that point I think something about Lewis Carroll just grabbed me, and he was so creative and is still being done over and over again, and so I guess I fell in love with poetry at that time, along with all the other forms of writing and so on. So I would just say that in life, if there's something that you love, just go for it. And no matter what you're doing, look for your creative side, because that's going to make you happier than anything, probably. And don't be shy about going after what you like, and don't be shy about taking a chance and putting things out there that you do, your art, your writing, your creative thoughts, whatever it is. Go for it. Music. I'm not a musician, I wish I were, but anyway, so don't hesitate. Time goes by.
Carpe diem, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Barbara, and we look forward to Terroir in 2017.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.